One thing that we saw in the previous video was that if firms are able to interact repeatedly in the market, they may be able to reach an understanding, a kind of unspoken, informal understanding, to keep prices relatively high. So that was illustrated by the slide that you see here, just showing how, in the case of an infinitely repeated prisoner's dilemma situation, firms could find their way to the monopoly price. Well, there could be strategies that firms could adopt to kind of reinforce that and to prevent that understanding from eroding. So let's consider some strategies that firms can use to keep prices high and to avoid destructive price wars. What I've illustrated here are some signs that one can see which proclaim that the firm will not be undersold. And it could even go so far as to say that if anybody offers a price that's less than what the firm is offering, they will beat that price by some certain amount, as is shown here on the left-hand side. Well, the purpose of this is to actually not indicate that we have a competitive market, but it's to suggest that cutting prices would be futile. This is called the price matching strategy. So when firms say, we will not be undersold, they're really telling competitors, don't bother cutting your price because we will match your price and we'll just end up in a price war and everyone will be worse off. So it would simply be better to keep our everyday high prices. So consumers could very often be fooled when they see signs like this. They might think that the market that they're interacting in is a very competitive one, but in fact it could be one in which firms have just quietly colluded with each other and are trying to prevent any kind of price reductions. Well, the tactics that I've described so far are ones which are perfectly legal. Firms can kind of reach these understandings without meeting and colluding. Firms could instead carry out illegal activities. We've considered earlier the issue of a cartel. So that's a situation in which firms are, in effect, acting as a single firm. They could maximize profits by fixing prices, or they could share monopoly profits by a process called bid rigging. So that would be a situation, for example, where a group of firms that are supposed to be competing, let's say to win a contract, could decide among themselves who was going to win the bid this time, and then next time another firm could win a contract. And in that way they could all agree on high bids and share the business among themselves. So this kind of collusion is explicit collusion as opposed to the kind of implicit collusion that I've been talking about so far, say as in the case of the infinitely repeated prisoner's dilemma. Well, one example of price fixing in a cartel comes from Europe, the fining of the firm Scania, 880 million euros a couple of years ago, over its role in fixing prices for heavy and medium trucks that were sold in Europe. So there were a variety of firms that were involved in this price fixing, as you can see here. Typically what happens in this sort of situation is that if one of the firms comes forward and admits that it's been involved in a cartel, that's been fixing prices, then it avoids the penalties. But the other firms have to pay a price. In this particular case, these companies that I've listed here completely dominated the production and sale of medium and heavy trucks sold in Europe. So they colluded among themselves for many years, fixing prices, and also, interestingly enough, avoiding the stricter pollution rules that have been set by the European Union around emissions by diesel vehicles. So these firms paid total fines of almost 4 billion euros. I mentioned the firm Scania because it refused to admit its guilt, I suppose despite overwhelming evidence, and so they got fined an extra amount. I believe they were fined about almost $1 billion US. That's the equivalent of 880 million euros. Well, price fixing occurs in all kinds of places, including Canada. A recent case which is still being investigated is the case of price fixing of bread in Canada. That's a picture of what is called bread in this country. Real bread looks like this. Good luck in finding it, however. Well, in Canada, price fixing of bread occurred between 2001 until 2015. And again, the way it worked here is that one company came forward and admitted that it had participated in this, and in doing so, it avoided criminal charges. So the Loblaws company, the company that owns the Atlantic Superstores and other similar stores here in this part of the country, is owned by Weston Bakeries, which in turn is owned by George Weston. The Westons are one of the richest families in Canada. So the Competition Bureau, the part of the federal government that deals with this kind of law, is investigating these particular companies, and that investigation is ongoing. Interestingly enough, the increase in the price of bread that was brought about by this conspiracy was actually being measured by the government at the time, except nobody noticed it. Just to show you the actual data, everybody is probably familiar with the idea of inflation and how inflation is measured. It's measured by government employees going around to different stores and writing down prices every month. And just to briefly summarize here, this conspiracy started in 2001. So here we have 2000 going up to 2015. And I won't go into the details, but this is an index in which the prices are scaled in a way so that they, in this case, take on a value of 100 in 2001. Well, what this is doing is just comparing the price, in this case of bread, rolls, and buns, with all items that consumers buy and other things that could be purchased from grocery stores. And you can see that starting around 2001, when this conspiracy began, the price of bread started rising very rapidly and then leveled out at around 2015. So anybody who'd been looking at the data would have seen that something weird was happening to the price of bread. But nobody noticed. And so the conspiracy went on for about 14 years, making lots of money for these companies, who will now be paying some big fines. Well, let's just think about another feature of prices in retail markets. One feature that economists call price dispersion is just the fact that the price of otherwise identical goods varies from place to place. So the goods are identical except for the location, which can make a difference, of course. So, for example, if you wanted to go out and buy a bar of soap, or if you wanted to buy some shoelaces, or a liter of milk, you would find that the price is different in different places. So we've been looking at sort of simple models in which there's just a single price, but firms can follow different strategies. Let's just briefly consider why there is this kind of price dispersion, why prices are different in different places. One reason is that sellers can simply choose to have a different strategy. So some sellers may always sell at high prices, others may sell at relatively lower prices. So those prices don't vary over time. The sellers have simply adopted a different strategy. One obvious example of a high price strategy can be found in convenience stores, say stores that might be located in neighborhoods where people can easily go and grab something that they need, or they may be stores that are open 24 hours a day and so offer some additional convenience for which people are willing to pay a higher price. Another possibility is that stores carry out what is called randomized pricing. That's really just a fancy way of saying that from time to time stores have sales and they have price cuts. Everybody's familiar with that. So maybe on one weekend the superstore will have certain things on sale. Sobeys may have other things on sale on the same weekend. So why would stores carry out this kind of strategy? Well, one reason would be to keep buyers confused. Nobody knows just where the cheapest good is going to be available. Unless they invest some time and effort searching out prices, people aren't going to know which sellers have the lowest prices at any one time. Some people may not care too much. They may just regularly shop at the same place. Other people may be more price sensitive, and they'll search around. So what stores are effectively doing is keeping their own customers who are not very price sensitive, and they're kind of sharing the customers who are price sensitive. So the price sensitive ones are going to search around for sales, and others aren't going to bother. The advantage from the point of view of the sellers is that they avoid long-term price cutting, price wars. Everybody knows, let's say, that a sale of milk this weekend at Sobeys is simply going to be temporary. It's not the beginning of a price war. And once the sale is over, prices will go back up to ordinary levels. Another strategy that firms can use is our old friend, product differentiation. Up until now, the whole discussion has really been largely focused on prices and price competition. But in reality, we have to remember that firms are selling differentiated products, not the simple identical products that are being sold in the Bertrand model, for example. So firms are competing not just on price, but on other characteristics. say the convenience store, perhaps on offering different hours or having a more convenient location for many buyers. Just consider a quick example. We could have a couple of gasoline stations selling apparently identical products, just a liter of gasoline is the same no matter where you buy it, but nevertheless, they're still differentiating their products. We could imagine some gasoline stations offering food, others might have air for your tires, or might be able to repair your car if that was needed. They may differentiate themselves by having different rewards programs, which seem to be a powerful way of attracting loyal customers. Finally, firms might simply try to develop a strong brand. Even though they're essentially selling an identical product, they could come up with fancy slogans like "Put a tiger in your tank," a slogan I remember from when I was a kid, and perhaps that will help develop customer loyalty. Well, this is all I'm going to say regarding strategies that firms might adopt to try to dampen competition, whether it's price competition or other kinds of competition for consumers.